vicious delivery and just managing to get out of the way of it.
What a marvellous catch. Well bowled, must be gone. This is a very fast over from Marshall.
And he's given him this time. And that was a very unwise decision, and he's got a go LBW there. Complete misjudgment from Mike Gattin. And he's gone, beautifully caught. Harper again taking a catch there.
There it is.
Good evening, friends. You must have realized we are having a very special show today. 18th of April, 1958. One of the greatest fast bowlers the game ever has seen was born. As we discussed on social media that we'll be paying a tribute. Luckily, three of us, me, Oyon and Shudeep, have watched him live in our childhood. We were the privilege to watch him. In an era where probably four fast bowlers were never heard of, Clive Lloyd unleashed a fury of extremely hostile bowlers, Colin Croft, then Sylvester Clarke, and then came Garner, Holding, Marshall, and Roberts. We are discussing, obviously, Malcolm Marshall. I mean, we all agree and mostly agreed across the world as perhaps the greatest pace bowler ever to have played this game. There will be debates. Alec Betzer, Wasim Akram, Jasprit Bumrah, Dennis Lillee, Richard Hadley. There will be 4 or 5 names which will come, but none more hostile than Marshall. And the beautiful part was that as aggressive that he was on the field, outside the field, he was a very, very lovely man. And it is an extremely cruel act of God to have taken him so early. But even after 20, almost 30 years of his passing away, cricket lovers, connoisseurs, aficionados, we remember Marshall, an extraordinary player. My first memory will come later. We saw the clippings, we saw what he can do, and we will discuss in the next half capable of and what he did. I'll start off with Oyon first. First memory of Malcolm Marshall. I have my first memory that I'll discuss. First memory, Oyon, of this extraordinary bowler.
So that was in the 1983 West Indies, visit to India under Clive Lloyd, where the Windies were smarting after the World Cup defeat at the hands of India in the Lord's final. And it was the Eden Test match. And, that was the second time I had ever gone to Eden. And, I had gone on the 4th day and India were 50 for 6. But in spite of that, I had gone, and Marshall opened the bowling, and he was bowling from the high court end. And he was completely scary. I mean, he was not one of those tall, lanky, giant-like bowlers. He was rather short. But his action was probably I must say, is probably the most hostile fast bowler's action I've seen. Because, he comes crouching, he came crouching along at a tremendous speed. And he would, before he bowled, it was almost like a crouching tiger which just leapt up at the crease and then unleashed the ball, which probably spit up like a cobra to the batsman, And I think the most fiery part of Marshall was not just his speed, but his ability to cut the ball off the pitch. which made him virtually unplayable because he was probably bowling at the high 130s or 140s or something, or low 140s or something. Because those days we didn't really measure speed, but you could see that he was fast enough to prevent batsmen from trying to get behind the ball. Right? I mean, here of course, my memory was that he came his first few balls, I think Shastri and Kapil were batting. I think in the second over itself, he had Kapil trying the Natraj shot and just scooped the ball for Dujon to take the dolly of a catch. Ashok Malhotra was the only guy who tried to fight a bit. I think he probably scored a 50 and spared the ignominy of India being bowled out less than 100. I think India were bowled out for just 100 or 102 or something. But he just inspired fear in me, and I do not think any other bowler ever has caused fear in me by the mere act of their bowling. Just he's different. I mean, I cannot ever think of somebody as scary as Marshall. And what we saw in the first clipping, right? I mean, he just decimated England in that 1984 tour. He just took England apart. And of course, the 1986 when England returned the favor, when they went to the Caribbean, Marshall smashing Mike Gatting's nose is an image which is etched in the annals of cricket. I think cricket will never forget that. Gatting leaving the ground with a completely bloodied face. So that's what he could do to batsmen. I think they had a mortal fear of him. I do not know of too many bowlers who inspired that amount of fear that Malcolm Marshall could. In spite of the fact that he was only probably 5 feet 8 inches tall. So I don't think he was too tall. And he did not look as scary as, say, a Garner or later on as an Ambrose or a Walsh or something. But he was menacing. He was just danger personified.
Yes, he was, I think, short compared to a pace bowler. He was. And of that era, I think Dennis Lilly, Michael Holding a little early, Andy Roberts, Colin Croft, Jeff Thompson, Rodney Hogg a little later. I think Lenny Pascoe, yes, of course, Lenny Pascoe. I think and Sarfraz Nawaz. Sarfraz Nawaz was there.
Imran.
I think
Imran.
In fact,
Imran.
Wasim also tall.
Wasim came much later.
Wasim came in 84.
Much later.
By the time Marshall was already a superstar.
85, yeah.
But agreed,
Andy
because
Roberts both Andy Roberts and Marshall was of same height.
yeah, they were
So-
around 5'9". What I can see from
think
Wiki is
Marshall,
5'9".
was something like that.
5'9".
But Roberts, I looked slightly taller. Roberts
Taller.
looked slightly taller.
Yeah.
So
Holding was 6'4" and
Holding
Garner was 6'8".
Garner was huge.
Garner 6'8", yes.
Huge.
But I think to take away from that, Oyun, very, very well played. I think I have the same feelings. I will come to it a little later. Sudeep, we watched Marshall live in 83. It was almost the same test match. I think Oyun watched, we also watched. 45 years, almost 50 or 45, I think, 17, 20, 43 years back. Your first impression of Malcolm Marshall, because I watched him first in the nets, and then I watched him in the double wicket tournament. I don't know whether Oyun remembers, there was a double wicket tournament after the test match.
Absolutely.
And I was near the net, and it was fearsome. It was like almost taking my breath away. I mean, it was 140. I'm quite sure it was around 140, but as Oyun rightly said, the way he used to cut the ball was, I mean, amazing. Your first memory, Sudeep, on Malcolm Marshall?
Yeah, it was, I think, way back in 1983, when India toured the West Indies, for a 5 test match series.
No, I think we watched Marshall in Eden. That was 84 January. After India won the World
83
Cup.
December.
83 December. That was in
84, yeah,
Eden.
83 December, 84 January.
I was not in Calcutta that time, so I did not watch, but I watched it on later, on video, on television. And it was one of a person of such a short height, the bounce and the pace he could extract on his very nippy action, it was very difficult to play, because of his short height, and he could gather so much pace, Garner. And it was very difficult. I remember, one particular instance, a batsman of Sunil Gavaskar's stature in the 1983 test, Kanpur. The bat simply flew out of his hands. A person of Gavaskar's technique, he found it so difficult to handle. So it just speaks volumes of what he could do on a pitch, any kind of pitch. If you look at his record, if you can see it on the screen, the strike rate, 46.70. Money per ball, he could take one
I
wicket
think
per
in the
46 ball.
history
It is the
of,
lowest. It is the
I
lowest.
think,
One of the
I
lowest in
think,
the history of.
I think one of the lowest. Of course, in the average, he's the second. If
Yeah.
all bowlers greater than 200 wickets, we know that.
And what is
But I think the
more
strike rate, he
remarkable
would be
is that
the
both
top
Test
two.
and ODIs, he was equally impressive. Both Test and ODIs.
And
So
you
just
remember, Sudeep, there were not many ODIs in those days, 78,
there were
late
hardly any
70s to
ODIs.
early 80s and mid 90s.
They used to play mostly Test matches that time.
An average of 26 and
But
economy of 3.5. I mean, amazing.
one thing, I would like to say, we often speak of Marshall's pace and, little
Yeah.
bounce. But what, he had he was a thinking type of bowler who could, outsmart the batsman with his guide, He was a thinking, for every bowler, he had some tricks. And that is something very special. He did not rely on raw pace all the time. He was always thinking how to get the batsman out. And he was a very thinking sort of bowler. Along with pace and bounce, that was a very lethal combination. And
Very true.
83 tour, West Indies tour, he was single-handedly, he destroyed the Indian batting lineup. A person, Mohinder Amarnath, scored 1 run in 6 innings. So that is still in our memory. That was a nightmare.
I think 78 to 91, if we see his career of 13 years, we can dissect it 78 to 82. Because in 80 and 80, when India went there in the 83, it was, of course, Marshall, but there was Holding as well. But from 83 to 87, when the England tour included, which Owen spoke of, perhaps he was the greatest bowler on earth for about 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely.
And he was ahead of Hadley. He was ahead of Hadley, Lilly, Imran, and everyone else.
I think
because Wasim Akram started to come into the picture in late 80s, early 90s. But I think 83 to 88, with 5 years, Malcolm Marshall probably was at the peak of his power.
West Indies tour of India, that established him as a destructive bowler of all times. He took 33 wickets, if I'm not mistaken, in that particular series. He was the leading wicket taker. And that, from there on, there was no looking back for Marshall.
I think look at his
averages, Test home and away, both equally impressive. This is something special.
Yeah. And when you look at it over a period of time, that is amazing. When you away Test matches, your average is 21 and your strike rate is under 50, probably you are at a very different level.
So what I was saying is, see, Marshall actually came to India twice. First time he came he came with Alvin Culture's team, which came to India in 78, 79. And there actually, again, he played in the Eden Gardens. And Gavaskar and Vengsarkar had a fantastic partnership in the Indian second innings, where Gavaskar had 183 not out and Vengsarkar was, I think, 157.
157 not out, yes.
Yeah, not out. And Marshall was dealt with at ease by Gavaskar. That was that 78, 79 thing. And then he actually, they went to Australia in 1980. There he started changing a little bit. But I mean, he morphed. It was actually in that 80-81 tour of Australia, 81, that one-day series and all, where Marshall started getting interesting, and the Marshall of 78 and the Marshall of 83 were two different bowlers, completely different bowlers.
Talking, yep.
Right, so 83, that West Indies series where India toured the Windies, where Amarnath played fantastically well. Gavaskar also scored 1 century, I think, at Guyana or something. And that was a very interesting innings of Gavaskar as well, because he was hit on the chin by Marshall. And then Ravi Shastri described that, he was hit on the chin. And then very, in a very sort of an unassuming manner, the next ball he hit a bowler's back drive for 4 runs, and he did not even flinch, because I think that was what Gavaskar was.
I think that was on the series from where India started. Actually,
yes.
The ascent of India started from that series.
In ODIs, because in the ODI tournament that they had, India actually won 2-1.
Correct.
They won 2-1. And then again at England, of course, the first ODI, they defeated West Indies, where Yashpal Sharma played this fantastic knock. They were thrashed in the next ODI. And then, of course, in the finals, they won again. But then in the 83 return series, West Indies decimated India to an extent. I think India had never, ever been decimated in that sort at home. In
I
fact,
think that, yes, the 3 test matches
three,
there and the 3 at home, 3
no,
6
yeah, yeah.
0.
Yeah, no, at home, West Indies defeated India 3-0 in 5 test matches, I guess. In India,
No,
it was
I
six
know. I think it
matches.
was 5 test matches or 3 test matches. It was.
It was more than 3, I think 4 or 5. Right? One they drew, I know. The Guyana test they drew. That is sure.
Okay.
Okay, one test, it may
Okay.
be 4 or 5, not
No,
sure.
it was a
In the
5 test. Where
five
83.
test
No, you're
matches.
speaking. No, it
Yes,
was
yes,
five
five
test
tests.
matches. 5 test
And in
matches.
the in
India
the in
lost
the
2-0, 2-0, I think, if I
2-0,
remember
yeah,
correctly.
2 or 3, I believe. They drew at
2-0.
least 2 that I remember.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
drew quite a bit. But the interesting thing was in the return series, out of 6, India lost 3.
3.
And in the one dayers, they were completely blackwashed 5-0.
Black. Yes.
So that kind of dominance, I do not think any touring team has probably ever, had in while visiting India. I mean, India, of course,
Correct.
suffered the ignominy of losing all 3 tests against New Zealand just a couple of years back, last year or
Yeah,
something, right?
last year.
I mean, that was anyways. I mean, that New Zealand team was compared to Clive Lloyd's team. Come on, it was a joke, right? It just shows what we have become. But then again, New Zealand didn't thrash us in the ODIs, I guess. Uh, Lloyd's team destroyed us in the test 3-0
No,
and
no.
in the
One
ODIs
thing in the
5-0.
New Zealand hasn't won any test comprehensively. There
Yes,
was a
yes.
fight
They
from India,
actually
but
fight. That
in
is
that
true.
83 tour,
Yes.
West Indies completely demolished India.
Demolished India.
New
That is
Zealand
true.
couldn't
Correct.
demolish,
New Zealand,
although they
one
sat
test, I think
by
they
3
drew
nil,
quite
but they
handsomely, right?
couldn't
I don't remember now, but I think
demolish.
one test,
No, no, no.
one test,
Each individual, no, no, no. Each of the test match was close up, almost close.
yeah,
In
I
fact,
mean,
last
closer
only
than
the
that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
I
there
think
was
the
a fight
last
from both the
test,
sides, but
yeah, I think the last test, I
no,
think
no,
they
no. There
won
was
comfortably, was it?
eventually
Or
fight
all
from
of
both
them?
the sides. No,
Mhm.
no. Neither test they dominated, but eventual fight from both the sides. But and
Yes,
they emerged as the winner over there. But
Yes,
yes, that is
in
India
true.
India
this
played West
83
Indies
series was
5 test
completely
matches. Ayon, you were right. And India
Yes,
lost 0-3 out of
yes,
that in
that's
West
what, yeah,
Indies. And then West
right.
Indies came for a 6 test match series.
Yes, that's
And
what I
India
said.
lost again
3-0,
0-3.
3-3.
3-0. So out of
But there
11,
was,
India lost 6.
yeah, but then what is important is, Rahul, is the way the West Indies dominated in that series. I don't think any team, as I'm reiterating, I don't think any team has ever dominated India in the manner Clive Lloyd's 1983 team dominated, both in tests and in ODIs. I mean,
And
Steve Waugh's
I,
team threatened to do
yeah.
that in 2001, but then we turned around brilliantly at the
And
end,
I think
right?
no,
all the teams that came
no.
to India, Ayon, we can have a fair deal because we've been watching cricket for 4 decades. I think the 2001 team was awesome. There's no doubt. The
Yeah,
2008 team under Gilchrist was also pretty strong.
yes.
But this 83 team probably was a little notch
2008,
ahead.
you probably mean the 2004 team, right?
Sorry,
That India lost.
2004 team, that 4 team, yes.
Yes, India
2004 team
lost.
was also very strong.
Very
But
strong,
this
yeah.
83 team probably was a team, as you
Completely.
rightly said, we were afraid. I mean, every day was a
Completely.
trepidation. Well, I mean, how many how many batsmen would survive was a call, basically, in that series. And if we
Exactly.
come down to the performance, I'll take Sudeep first. I mean, Malcolm Marshall is, of course, the greatest bowler, almost the greatest ever, accepted by unanimously. His performance in India, of course, if you look at a pie chart, you will realize the statistics, or you would say, understand. If you perform consistently with a higher opportunities, obviously you are a great bowler. And I think that is exactly against England. He played 26, the most of his test matches, and 127 wickets at 19 probably speaks of the greatness. I mean, Mike Catting, of course, nose smashed. David Gower had his toe crushed. There were Graham Fowler, Chris Broad. I think he's decimated England in 86 and 83 both. But Sudeep, talk us a little about his extraordinary performance in England. And I think those 2 series probably put him as the greatest bowler ever. And that is why
Yeah,
Wisden and the English are so much in awe about this extraordinary man.
absolutely, absolutely. He was absolutely devastating against England. Because I think he used to reserve his best against India as well as England. These two teams,
Correct.
absolutely. Mane, he was dominant, and Mike Gatting. There are so many examples you have taken. And but what was another? I would like to point out. That in 1984, if I remember, Mane, I think he had a broken thumb.
Correct.
that,
In which is played with a broken, with a
so
single
that
bat.
just goes to show his, this tenacity, his spirit, with a fractured thumb. He bowled full quota. He bowled the entire match and he batted one-handed with that fractured thumb. So this is the kind of the courage, the whatever you call it, this is the stuff of a legend, a,
Absolutely.
a perfect example of, toughness and
I think
commitment to the
also
game.
another fact, Oyon, because he was not express, and he was expressed, but he was not 150 like Roberts and Holding. I think the way he used to cut the ball, his cutting was very, very favorable for England pitches. I think those pitches in England.
Absolutely. I mean, I see that is, see, if the ball swings, even if it's late swing, you still get some little bit of time to play it, right?
Time to play,
But
yes.
if the ball is moving off the pitch, then there is nothing, because then it is like that is the worst for a batsman, because you get no time. And see, I don't think, in fact, you see, Robertson Holding, I don't think 150, I don't think is correct. I think those days the fastest probably was Jeff Thompson.
Correct.
I do not
But
think,
Holding was always 140
Holding was
plus.
quite fast, but the Holding
I
that
think
we
there was
saw
no
in India
measurement,
was
much
no
Dennis
longer.
Lilly,
measurement.
Dennis Lilly
There
was
were
also
no
there.
measurements.
Dennis
Correct.
Lilly.
Yeah, he was very fast.
Dennis
Lilly
Lilly
was
was also
fast.
there.
Lenny Pascoe was the fastest along with Thompson at that point of time.
Pascoe, Thompson. Actually, even Imran was very quick. I mean, Imran
Imran was
like
also
82.
initially was in that period,
Yes,
78 to 82. He was very,
But
very quick.
Imran was not
82 was
that much of fast. He was mainly mid his
no,
first
no.
his
I can
speed
tell you. See,
peaked around.
no. There was this speed competition once held in, I think, the early 80s, very early 80s, where Holding, Thompson, Lilly, Imran, everybody bowled. Thompson, I think, came first, but Imran was like
Thompson.
third or fourth. Imran at his peak was extremely fast, right? And that is why you see Imran's. In fact, I mean, we are going off topic a bit, but it's a
I
fact
will
that
say Wasim Akram
yeah,
was more faster than Imran.
I don't think so.
When
I
I see
think
the
I think
Wasim
Imran at his
Akram in
peak.
his
Imran at his peak, Imran at his peak, I was just looking at statistics a few days back. Between 1982 to some 87 or something, Imran had an awesome time. He averaged something like 50 with the bat, and with the ball, he averaged some 21 or 22 or something, which is
After he came back from
remarkable.
that back injury.
Yes, he was
Yes,
deadly. He was
he was
completely
deadly.
deadly.
I think
mean,
Imran at his peak was faster than Wasim Akram. You were right.
I think so.
Yes.
No,
he
I
was.
don't think
was faster.
because Wasim Akram
was faster.
Wasim Ak-
Waqar Yunus was probably faster.
Waqar also was fast, pretty fast.
Waqar
yes.
was very fast.
Wasim
Shoaib
Akram
also.
in his early days when while in the during the 92 World Cup or even before 87, he peaked around 143, 144. I don't
That
think
I think
Imran has peaked
Imran
up
would
to
have
that.
reached. No, you have not seen Imran, right? 82 Imran. Sunil
Was
Gavaskar said
fearsome.
that
Yes.
But
Gavaskar
because I
said
have
that
seen
no, you listen to me just once. Gavaskar said the only way to play Imran is to put the side screen in the middle of the pitch. This is Sunil Gavaskar saying that time at the peak of his form. Okay, so Imran in 82 was a beast. He went and won, defeated Pakistan in India in Pakistan single-handedly, then defeated England in England again single-handedly. So Imran in 82 was a different beast. Okay,
40
of
wickets.
course,
That was a record that time.
That's fantastic. I mean,
The entire series.
Waqar and Shoaib Akhtar was probably the fastest of all Pakistani bowlers. Waqar at his peak was probably the fastest, very fast as well. But Wasim Akram was most a swing and cut bowler. He was never a devastatingly quick bowler. I mean, later on they became like 120, 130s, but he was like, extremely devastating as a swing and cut bowler. Okay, so, but then again,
swing and cut, but in the initial days he was quite, because I remember once upon a time Viv Richards was about to first when he's that means first was about to play Wasim Akram. He was a little bit fearsome with the pace of the Wasim Akram, along with the pace and along with the devastating swing.
Anyway, so we are discussing Marshall. So we shouldn't get off topic.
I think Sudeep, where do we put? I'm a little into his bowling as well. I mean, off late, of course, Jasprit Bumrah is threatening to, of course, and his obviously numbers would say so. But where do we place Malcolm Marshall? How does history judge Marshall? He is, of course, the greatest. We know, we have seen. You and Oren have seen him live, so we definitely have a better idea. But what's your take on Marshall basis these numbers and basis what we have seen on the TV. He was fearsome. As Oyan started off saying, he was really absolutely lethal.
You cannot, his numbers, his statistics is absolutely remarkable. There's no doubt about it. But, you can't judge Marshall just by statistics. It is the impact he had on the game. That is something very, very special. The fear he instilled in the batsmen. The batsmen would simply, go for cover the moment they saw Marshall steaming in. So this is the impact which he had on the batsman, on the game itself. This is something he will be remembered throughout Mane. This is something, this legacy is going to remain. This is how he will be remembered. Because if you talk of fast bowler, a West Indies fast bowler, the name of Malcolm Marshall will always come first. And then only we'll say Curtly, Ambrose, Andy Roberts, Michael Holding. But Marshall is the number one.
Holding also is my personal favorite, and I think Holding also was extremely fearsome. The over to Brian Close and then over to Jeff Boycott was extremely fearsome.
Also, we are forgetting Courtney Walsh.
Courtney Walsh was nowhere near Marshall, nowhere near in terms of legacy.
So, as a legacy, as a legacy, Marshall will on that off.
Where do we put Malcolm Marshall? We know, we are discussing on his birthday. He is one of the greatest ever. Where do we put Marshall in the great history? Because England people are just gaga. Overall, his record seems to speak that obviously about himself. And we know in cricket, Barry Richards is a great batsman, obviously for right reasons, and numbers do not speak for themselves, which Neville Curtis famously said that scoreboard is an idiot. Where do we, because we watched him live, you and me both, where do we keep Malcolm Marshall in terms of greatness and impact, as Sudeep said?
See, Rahul, I hope you remember in that infamous 83 tour, Gavaskar's, of course, Sudeep mentioned the bad falling down incident. But of course, after that, we also have to say that Gavaskar scored that fantastic century at Firozshah Kotla. But actually, there was this meme going on. Of course, those days it was not called as memes, but it was actually this thing that was going on, very big, very hit sort of a thing, that Sunny Tere Piche Marshall Aa Raha Hai. That is the only time ever after that Kanpur incident, what used to, people was chanting from the stands at Delhi, at Firozshah Kotla, when Marshall was bowling to Gavaskar, the Sunny Tere Piche Marshall Aa Raha Hai. Even at Chennai, some people shouted in Hindi. Okay, so in Gavaskar's entire career of that 16 years, where he was such a great, he's the fantastic average against the Windies, the only bowler ever regarding whom there has been a meme on Gavaskar has been Malcolm Marshall. Okay, so that speaks for itself. That this is one bowler who created, as I said, awe, fear, respect, everything. But more interestingly, I think the wicket was not important for Marshall. The fact that he could I do not think the wickets which the Windies got in the 1983 series were anything close to fast or scary. Kapil was also he was in the best form of his life. He also got a lot of wickets. But the Windies scored almost in all the innings, they scored more than 300, 200. I think probably around 450, 400 runs in most of the innings, right? So the wickets, and Indian wickets are never fast or nothing like that. They were not two pata wickets, but they were not inducive to that amount of pace or bounce. In spite of that, Marshall created absolute, he wreaked havoc. So what I'm trying to say is, irrespective of what kind of pitch you provided Marshall, the fact that he could generate that amount of cut from the pitch, that is something which probably would put him in among the greatest, the most effective bowlers, pace bowlers, fast bowlers that cricket has ever seen. If you had a wicket which was helpful, of course he was devastating. But even in the flat wickets of India, dust bowls of India, Pakistan, he had great success at Pakistan also. Even there, I think Marshall was devastating. And I do not remember any bowler. So Glenn McGrath also has a good average in India. Anderson as well. But then no bowler, even Roberts, Andy Roberts came in the 1974-75 series. He was pretty terrifying bowler. He was at the peak of his career, the fastest of his career in 1974-75, when Vishwanath played two magnificent innings at Eden and Chepauk. Even then, Roberts did not incur the amount of fear, that amount of deadliness that Marshall did in 83. So that I would put him, just like his averages show that he has the second best average in terms of bowlers that have ever played cricket. I think he deserves this place. Bumrah, remember that he has played only 45 tests. Marshall's average of 21 is over 81 tests, almost double the number.
That's
that
what
Bumrah
I said.
has played.
Numbers over a period of time, longevity, of course, speaks about the greatness.
Exactly. I think his place as number 2 is completely justified.
We would say he's the greatest, and a lot of people say that he's the greatest pace bowler ever to have played the game. Sudeep, my question to you is what Clive Lloyd had said when Marshall passed away in his tribute to Marshall. He said that when you have 4 pace bowlers of equal merit, and when you let go Marshall, Holding, Garner, and Roberts, when Roberts has 202, Garner had 259. Holding had 200, I think 40 something. When you have 3 pace bowlers over 200 and then the 4th one comes, because if 20 wickets, the 3 doesn't get, the 4th will. To get 376 after your 3 other bowlers have got 200 plus, probably speaks of the greatness of Malcolm Marshall.
Absolutely, the way he dominated.
When you are a one-man bowler like Kapil Dev, it is easy to pick up 9 wickets. So when you have 3 bowlers picking up wickets in tandem, then to become
at that time, West Indies, all 4 were capable of running through
any side.
So in that case, in this particular thing, taking 376 wickets at such a 20.94 average just speaks volumes about his greatness. And his strike rate is something really impressive. Every 1 wicket per 46 balls. So that is remarkable.
Which is almost 7 overs. 7 overs, he used to get 1 wicket.
He will get 1 wicket. That is remarkable.
I mean, there's no remotes, which I can remember. I still remember the number of matches in that 83 series, which Oyon speaking of in radio when I used to hear the commentary, and a few matches I watched. I think it was really, at times it was Garner, I think, who gave us some respite because he was so angling and so gangly and tall. Because Marshall, Roberts, and Holding, and then you had Larry Gomes and Fouth Backus and Gus Logie as the spinners. With 7 bowlers, I mean, the only time probably the Indians had few respite, and little respite was when maybe Larry Gomes and Gus Logie came to bowl, because with Garner, Marshall, Holding, and Garner, Marshall, Holding, and Roberts, you had.
But Garner didn't come to India.
No, Garner didn't come to India.
So India, it was Marshall, Holding, Roberts, and Winston Davis.
Winston Davis and Wayne Daniel, correct. Because Wayne Daniel, Sylvester Croft had come in the 78 series. Sylvester Croft was there.
Yes.
Sylvester Clark.
Sylvester Clark. Success in subcontinent pitches was equally impressive.
I think that the 2 series that made him absolutely legend was the 82-83 England series. And the 86 also, in which he broke
Batting's nose.
And the 83 series, of course, in which Gavaskar's bat flew. But overall, Oyon, in an era when you have so many pace bowlers, you had Marshall, you had Garner, you had all West Indies entire lot. You had Wasim Akram coming in, you had Rennie Pascoe, Rodney Hogg, you had Malcolm, you had Dennis Lilly's, I mean, he was finishing at 83. Yes, Richard Hadley's second phase, which came up brilliantly. Richard Hadley was absolutely at the peak, and that's why I wanted Hadley's numbers, because Hadley's numbers are equally phenomenal. His strike rate a little high, but his numbers are equally phenomenal. One of the greatest ever also. Oyon, do you think that Marshall was so good only because he did play test matches and ODIs? If there was a T20 at that point of time, had Marshall been so lethal?
That is a very interesting question. That is what I was myself thinking. Given these wickets, these horrible wickets that this T20 is played on, where I think the bowlers, it's like a graveyard for bowlers, right? All the pitches that the IPL is played on, at least the IPL is played on, that would really be something that would be very interesting, because nowadays, the bats also are far better quality. The batsmen really improvise a lot. They play very fearlessly. That would be a very interesting question. But at the same time, if you look at the one day, the runs per over that I think Marshall conceded, because he played a fair bit of ODI cricket, of course, and I
Yeah,
do
he
not
did.
think he was ever taken to the cleaners or something by any batsman ever. Okay. And I believe that, given his ability to get, this fantastic movement off the wicket and being such a crafty bowler, I think he would have been one
Sudeep, can we
bowler
have this
any IPL
ODI
team.
record a little?
Yeah.
I think any IPL team would have
Is it
Yeah,
visible?
just,
Is it
you
yeah,
know,
visible?
thanks.
see,
Yeah, it
three and
is.
a half, three and a half economy is phenomenal. Three and a
Over a
half
period of
economy
12 years. Yes, over a
12
period of
years
12
is
years.
phenomenal, right? So 35 runs and strike rate 45. That means he's getting 7. So about 1 wicket for 35 is when he comes in.
35.
Right?
Yes.
At
1 for
least
35.
1 wicket. That is fantastic bowling on any pitch. So that is remarkable, right? And so there is peak, if I may say so, between like 81 to 88. I don't think there were too many one dayers played. If they were
Yes.
played, I think he would have been even is this average would have been even better. So I think he would have been a bowler any franchise would have just died to get.
Absolutely. I think given the
I,
norms of the time, I think he would have been. Uh,
So I think we can ask Ishanjan. He is probably, he's probably never seen Marshall live.
right.
Of course, no opportunity. So what is his
Obviously.
impression? Is an interesting thing to know
Yeah,
as
because
the next
Ishanjan is in
generation.
a different generation. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
as the
important
next
that we bring him
generation.
into. Yeah.
I
I
was
think it is
actually
important to
fortunate
understand the grades of the game.
myself
Yeah,
to.
Ishanjan, your take on
Uh,
Malcolm Marshall.
I was actually very much fortunate to see few such glimpses of Marshall in my initial days, because in the while that Carey Packer series of this Benson and Hedges Cup I remember the 1992 World Cup, and prior to 1992 World Cup there was a I think quadrangular series where
No, no,
India
triangular,
featured
triangular.
with
India, West
triangular
Indies,
Triangular.
series.
Australia.
Yeah, yeah,
India versus
India, Australia,
Australia.
West Indies,
Saurav,
where
Saurav Ganguly made his debut in that
yeah, Saurav
infamous
Ganguly made his
series.
debut, and over there, India have beaten West Indies twice, and one match was tied, and one match I think West Indies managed to win against India, and West Indies was in beaten by
That
India,
was
thrashed
Malcolm
by
Marshall's
India two
last
times.
series, by the way. That was his last series. He retired after that.
Yeah, his last series was in '92 World Cup. The 90 after '92 World Cup
Yeah,
he retired.
91 and 92 World Cup. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
'92 after '92 World Cup, he and Viv Richards both retired. That point
Retired,
of
right.
time, I have seen, although that was a phase, that was the dawn of his career. I have seen Sachin Tendulkar played him very much comfortably. Although that was keeping in mind that was the dawn of his career. That point of time, his age was 35 plus. So in
33. He
that
was
point,
33, 34.
I think
33,
33,
34.
34. And Sachin was on 17 at that point of time. And Sachin, I must say that Sachin has played him so confidently. And at that point of time, Sachin, Malcolm Marshall name itself was furious. By given on his most ability to cut, as rightly my senior pointed out, mostly his cutting the ball in fact drifting it in the air, that was quite because every pace bowler has some specialty. Like Wasim Akram's specialty was his in swing, his ability to swing the ball in both directions. As like Bumrah has some fiery, all the slower Yorkers, and he's also very good. In fact, Bumrah also is mastery of he has his mastery of cutting the ball, somewhat drifting it in the air. In fact, I am quite Marshall main USP was the cutting the ball, and I must point out over here in India at present moment, we are having among the youngsters who are playing in the IPL or featuring in there are players who has this capacity. I'm not saying that they are not comparing them with Marshall, but they I have seen bowlers who have this ability of cutting the ball in the air, and he has in fact featured in the under 19 World Cup also last point this last time. So Raj Limbani. In fact, I have seen this Deepesh Devendran also. They are having this capacity. So actually, when Marshall played at that point of time, cricket, there was hardly any analysis. That means uh, there was hardly any analytical point of time, and analysis used to be very less that point of time. In that cases, that time this armory, this he had an extraordinary armory of, but gradually with the point of time, this has been the USP of lot of the other bowlers, because cricket has gradually changed as per to the time. So in that cases, I would say that definitely one he, if I don't know what that point of time, if he would have been over here with his presence, or those players, those who are playing these bowlers at point of time, what that could happen. But Marshall itself, Marshall, the name Marshall is it's a resonance in among the Indian, those cricket lovers. It's a resonant personification in everyone's name. He is as the fiercest, one of the fiercest bowler ever, and as rightly pointed out, among the test, yeah, matches, among the he's as per to the average, he's after, although Bumrah, because nowadays the lethal at that point of time, there was, as rightly pointed out, when Marshall used to play, there was Jeff Thompson, players like Dennis Lilly, there was Joel Garner. Even at this current era, I hope hardly Bumrah is featuring among, right, when the last time when India played the test, the name Bumrah, Siraj, Shami, they featured equally with a great potency in the say, but that impact which Malcolm Marshall used to create, because nowadays Bumrah, you will see among the whichever fast bowler, first you should Bumrah's name should will always come in the mind. Among that point of time, there was the competition among the bowling was much more fierce than right now. Cricket has changed. Now it has become a batsman's game rather than a bowler's game. So
Thank you,
in that
Chandan.
aspect, on that aspect,
Uh, I have something important. I mean, I have a point. Sudeep, can you just go back 2 slides where we'll be comparing him with the other greats just before? Yeah. Uh, One thing, Oyon, I think the last slide which Sudeep has, we'll come back to it also. The greatness of Malcolm Marshall was his ability to cut off the air. Uh, I think that is the reason I'm just looking at his ODI record also. He had a phenomenal record against England also, at a strike rate of 33. He had 47 one wickets for 26 matches, his performance best, apart from Australia. But he had 47 from 40 matches. India was on very average, 19 wickets. His ODI exploits against India not that great. Do you think his greatness is mainly, and when we compare with Bumrah, because Bumrah overtook him in strike rate, an average, do you think his greatness, and he hardly got injured in his career, do you think his greatness was much to do with his angling action, and because he was not chest on and but side on, and he hardly faced an injury? And do you think that because he played mostly in England, he played in Hampshire, he was one of the big giants of county cricket, do you think his playing in England actually helped him to develop and garner
Yes.
that bowling speech, which actually rather then helped him to do well against the Placid Indians? Because if he was a 150 plus bowler, I don't think he would have done well against India in that 83 tour. Because in India, in the dust pitches,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
do well. If you look at this record, he probably strikes up with the very best. And that's why I had Richard Hadley as well. We could have had, we have Wasim Akram and Holding also. We could have a Sydney Burns, and we could have had Alec Bedser and Freddie Truman also in that if we wanted. But what is your take on his greatness in England, particularly? Because is it because of his height, because of his leg swing? Why was he so lethal in England and India?
See,
Your take.
see, yeah. So I think his action, first of all, he
Yeah,
came in like an arrow, almost like he
correct.
accelerated gradually. There
Gradually.
was no slowing down gradually, and he came at top speed. But then if you look at his landing and all, it's all very sort of rhythmical. I mean, he came in that sort of, he just kept on increasing velocity, and then there was that kind of a, that leap, that angling leap into the bowling crease, and the landing, etc., were all very smooth. I mean, he did not exert anything extra.
That's
I mean,
exactly my question,
Bumrah's
Ayan. Yeah.
Bumrah's action, if you see, I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of a jerk, because he has a very short run up, is
Bumrah's action creates a lot of trouble for his back.
exactly, because his entire that speed lift, whatever he gets, is because of that very jerky action at the end. Huge amount of impact he gets from his shoulders and his back. So very clearly he's putting a lot of stress on his body, and I do not think with that kind of a extreme stress that he exerts on his body, it's not possible that he can really get his survive for very long. Whereas Marshall, he had an extremely smooth run up where he didn't put any extra stress on any part of his body. That is what I believe from what I've seen of his actions. Of course, those days you never had that kind of very detailed analysis. You didn't really have, in fact, you didn't have a physical fitness coach probably also. You probably had a trainer.
They had only one coach. They didn't have a batting coach, no bowling coach, no fielding coach, nothing. They just one
basically,
coach.
Everybody was on their own. Everybody on his own, right? Nothing, no help you got. So, and England, if you ask, see, he, as we all agree, that he was his ability, he was devastating basically because of the movement he got from the pitch. So in England, that was accompanied by movement in the air. So now
that is exactly why we are discussing a little bit on this.
Both swung and then cut. That would make it almost impossible to play, right?
Impossible.
And he was like the batsman, and at that pace, which is near 140s, you have no reaction time. And if you see, it was all the way my Gatting was out to him padding up. It was basically the batsman decided on a stroke, predetermined stroke from the trajectory of the ball, and then the ball after pitching would do something different. My Gatting in that, the first set of highlights we saw, in that reel we saw, was identically out LBW padding up in both innings of a test match. The first innings, he was out almost like in few balls. The next innings, he was playing well. If you just saw into the scorecard, he actually was playing very well. And then suddenly Marshall came and he repeated that. So it was like you decided on a stroke. The Marshall gave you no reaction time, and you saw it. You saw the ball leaving the bowler's hand, and it seemed to go a little outside. So you thought it would be an outswinger, and then so you just sort of padded up, and then lo and behold, the ball would just come in, and you were a sitting duck. So if you saw the number of times he got batsmen padding up and become LBW, I think Lamb was out like that, Pringle was out like that, Gatting several times. It basically tells us that the only way that the batsmen thought they could survive was if they decided to play a stroke based on the initial trajectory of the ball. They would see the ball swing, out of his hand, and they would think the ball would continue like that, and the ball would do the opposite. And the batsman would just become bowled or LBW. And I think Imran used to do that quite a bit. But this level of deception, I do not think any bowler has really had in England to the extent that Marshall had.
Right. Sudeep, my question to you is regarding the setup. Just keep this slide. He was as good as, he was as good as Jasprit Bumrah in setting up batsmen. We have seen that. Bumrah set up a lot of batsmen the same way he did. And number two was, my question to you first is, without reverse swing, and he was not an exponent of reverse swing like Wakar and Wasim, why was he so good in cutting the ball both ways? Without a reverse swing, he was able to get bowlers straight away. So what is your take on, of course, we are discussing different aspects of his greatness. One is cutting the ball both ways, because he used to cut it off David Gower. We saw that clip in which he got floored Gower actually. Gower was totally crouched and he was LBW. So he was able to get Chris Broad and Gower, who were top order left-handers, and he was able to get the ball away from Lamb, and as Ayan rightly said, from Gatting was a bunny of his. So without reverse swing, how do you think, how did Marshall get those batsmen out? Then we will come to the setting up of course, that.
Yeah, I think because of his, he had a different kind of bowling action, because as Ayan rightly pointed out, it was a very smooth bowling action, and with his the way he, at the time of his delivery, it was something, he could mislead the batsman with his, with the same kind of action, he could swing the ball both ways, cut the ball both ways rather. So that made it very more and more difficult, and especially, with his late movement, he was more difficult to play, with his late movement of the. So I think this to some extent, but to a large extent, was definitely his bowling action helped him to get this extra different, the bounce and the pace and other things. His bowling action had a lot to do with this. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a good point you made, misleading the bowlers, because he was not an exponent of
Misleading
reverse
the
swing. He
batsman.
didn't
Yeah,
struffle the ball
absolutely.
and the same.
Yeah, yeah.
So with the same action, he misled both the batsmen.
Uh,
And of course, which Oyon pointed out rightly, that he was able to get swing off the air and off the pitch, both. Which of course Wasim Akram also got it in the later career, but to
and
get
that is
such a
why he was
success
successful. He was successful on flat pitches. This ability made him.
absolutely, we're
Yeah.
coming to India also on that. Oyon, the last point, adaptability. I think he probably, like Bumrah, he was one of the very few bowlers who was outstanding abroad and at his home. Outstanding in India. Why was he so good in India? In where the pacers across the world have struggled, except Wasim Akram and Richard Hadley, everyone have struggled. Why do you
No,
think he was so good in India?
Magra and Anderson were also quite good in India. I think one thing that is common to all these bowlers is that there was no let up. So you did not bowl a single loose ball. So you did not give the batsman any room to, no width outside off stump, full tosses to no chance, I mean, no half volleys, no long hops, continuous sustained aggression, yeah, with no hope for getting easy runs. And that kind of speed, the ability to surprise you with bouncers. He would just come up with these, not even half pitch balls, but he would get length balls to leap up to you. And such, because of that whippy action of his, like Akram. In fact, Akram is like a left-handed version of Marshall. If you really think of their actions, the way they sort of whipped, that fast whip of
Yes,
the,
Akram, I know, almost same.
very
Yeah.
close. I mean, if you see that their hand velocity, the way that hand velocity, I think, was extremely fast. That whippy action that allowed
They
them.
skidded onto the batsman.
Right, skidded, and you could get the ball to bounce very disconcertingly at almost like quarter length. So it was not at 3/4 lengths, at almost like just short of good length. You would have the ball leap at you, and that was very difficult to batsmen to play. Given the fact that you have very little adjustment time, because he was bowling at about probably late 130s or maybe at touching 140, and as I said, ball would cut off the pitch, no loose balls, devastating Yorker. He had Anshuman Gaikwad bowled. I remember Gaikwad had this massive backlift, and Marshall exploited it with a fantastic Yorker. Gaikwad couldn't get the bat down, and it was just his stumps were all over the place. So he could, in fact, I remember I was a kid. I always used to think Gaikwad with that massive backlift. What happens if a bowler bowls full? And lo and behold, immediately Marshall bowled this full ball, and Gaikwad couldn't get the bat down. And you could see that he was exploiting, batsmen's weaknesses so brilliantly. So thinking bowler, as is mentioned in this slide, no loose balls at all, no escape, the ability to surprise the batsman at any point of time. I think what more could you get?
Absolutely. We'll now wind up the show with one word from all of you. We'll start with Ishanjan, because Ishanjan hasn't seen much of course, that's not his fault. Ishanjan, literally you have seen in videos and very short, comparing to the other bowlers that we've seen, where do you place Marshall?
See, on lieu on the fact that, with the fast bowlers, I have seen Wasim Akram definitely. As if you tell me about some deep fast bowlers, come with me in my mind with some speciality. Like Wasim Akram is a sizzling swinger of the ball. He can swing the ball in both that. His master, his armor is with the swing. Jasprit Bumrah is with the variation. The mainly slower in swinger is the most specialty. Is specialty. So Marshall, in that case, I will say he will He's a very deadly bowler, as rightly mentioned by my senior Oyunda, that he's the cut of. So in that cases, at saying at that point of time, I will place Marshall definitely one. If I place Jasprit Bumrah as the first, then obviously I will place Wasim Akram as the number second because due to his sizzling swinger. Then I will place Malcolm Marshall due to the tremor that he created. Actually, he was a terror at that point of time in everyone's mind by the fact. So I will definitely keep him because I have the time I have seen Wasim Akram when the ball used to come like right currently when ball comes in hand of Bumrah, he is a god in the fast bowling. At some point of time, Wasim Akram, in fact, Glenn McGrath, he was specialty for his versatility in
I
everywhere.
thought you should have
In
taken
that
Dale
case,
Steyn's name. Dale Steyn was an extraordinary bowler.
not there, not up
Not
to.
Dale Steyn. No, I like Dale Steyn a lot. I mean,
Will say, yeah,
outstanding
I
bowler.
will
Very,
rather
very
keep
good.
say Wasim Akram. I will say Alan Donald in that case because Alan Donald was known for his actually raw pace and mainly
Alan
for
Noel
his
also,
pace
Alan
and
was
movement of the
pace. He
ball.
was raw pace. He didn't have so much of guile like
Raw pace.
Marshall had.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He
Alan
was not
Noel
so.
also. I have
Okay,
seen
but
the first match he played at Eden in '91 when South Africa was back in cricket. He was pace. He was lightning pace. That's why he was called White Lightning.
he was
He was very, very
lightning pace.
fast. He was very fast.
He was.
Thanks, Ishanjan. We are
Yeah, yeah,
running out
yeah.
of time. Sudeep, one word because we watched him the closest among all of us here.
Yeah.
Where does Marshall, and you rightly said the legacy piece, where does Marshall stand in the history and the pantheons of the great bowlers the world has ever seen? I
I
would rate him. I would rate him along with maybe Alec Betzer, who I have not seen, Freddie Truman, Wasim Akram, Richard Hadley, and
yeah.
Glenn McGrath.
I think if you consider three best fast bowlers, Marshall will be on the top three. Will always be on the top three. And see, he had many other abilities. I won't go into that later, but I
Correct.
will just define one word. Fearsome. That is the in. That
Which
is the
Ayan said, he was
yeah.
ruthless, like
Fearsome.
Michael
This is
Holding. I was
he was
very afraid of
ruthless.
Holding when he
He
used to
was
come to bowl.
fearsome, and
He was fearsome.
the fearsome pace attack of West Indies that time, and he was the leader of the pace
And
attack. He
he
led.
was extremely talented. That also was very
Absolutely.
important. He was
He was a
ruthless.
versatile. He was a
He was
versatile
an
bowler.
absolute brilliant gem, like Jasprit Bumrah. Thank you, Sudeep. Finally, Vayan, will close up with you. Your impression on Malcolm Marshall, of course.
Nightmarish. One bowler who probably surely gave batsmen nightmares. I do not think there are too many bowlers who gave, I mean, the 86 England team was not just beaten, they were demolished. When
Demolished.
England toured West Indies in West Indies, 5-0, they were thoroughly backwashed.
I think that series they
And
were devastated. They were just broken by
no,
Marshall.
mentally, if you
Mentally. Yes, that's what
if
I'm
you
saying, mentally.
so John Embury was destroyed by Viv Richards. I
Yes.
tweeted
His career
recently,
was over. So was Norman
all
Cowan. So was Norman
finished
Cowan's.
actually.
Yes. By Viv
I mean,
Richards.
I do not think there have been too many tours in Test cricket where the visiting team has been so thoroughly devastated, not just in the game of cricket, but as human beings. Every
Absolutely.
single player who toured England, I mean West Indies, to be player of the English team who toured the Windies in 1986, never, I mean, changed as human beings. They never ever forgot that. That became indelibly etched in their lives.
I think
And I think
that was a brutal series. That was a brute.
the main perpetrator who caused such a chemical change in the lives of the Englishmen was Malcolm Marshall. I do not think a fast bowler has had that amount of influence ever in any test series, anytime at all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ayan, Sudeep, and Ishanjan. We had a wonderful, wonderful discussion, not only a tribute, wonderful dissection of the greatness of Malcolm Marshall, and we also discussed why he has been such a great bowler for a very, very long period of time. Very short career, very short life, and that's why the greatness remains. Thank you so much, Sudeep, Ishanjan, and Ayan. I hope the viewers will like as much as we enjoyed making this show. We've been planning it for some time, and we all have been watching. I mean, the majority of us have watched Marshall live, so it was absolute pleasure and privilege to pay tribute to one of the greatest. And the very fact that we lost him so early also relates to the fact that the memories are so poignant about such a wonderful human being as Wasim Akram and Michael Atherton led in their eulogy after he passed away, that he was a fearsome bowler, as Owen said, but a wonderful human being off the field. On that note, I would like to thank all of you, and we wish our viewers would like this program. Thank you so much, and good night.